So hello everyone, welcome. I'm going to be talking about Ansible tonight, which is a configuration management tool. What we'll cover tonight, we'll cover some basics on Ansible, give you a few simple examples, nothing too complicated. We'll also talk a little bit about the Ansible Galaxy, which is a place where you can get lots of pre-built modules and whatnot for Ansible. What we won't cover too much about, we won't go too hairy into all the details of an Ansible deployment. We won't cover the Ansible Tower service. I've never used it, so I have no idea. That's for you to discover and give us a talk about later on, if you so desire. And none of the Ansible services like Automation Jumpstart and Health Check. Again, if you have any experience with all this stuff, we'd be more than happy to have you come and talk about it. So, I understand that there's a lot of heated discussion about configuration management, a lot of opinions about configuration management. And while I understand that everyone has opinions about this stuff, I kindly ask, this is what works for us, so if you have something that works for you, please give a talk. Thank you. So there's a lot of metaphors in configuration management out there. A lot of people talk about orchestration, and the idea is that you have a bunch of individual musicians that are out there, and they, each play their own little piece, but they're all in concert together with each other, and it all sounds magical and musical and whatnot. Our server room is a little more like a jazz combo, where everyone is kind of playing off of the same song sheet, they kind of, do the same key, but they're really doing their own thing. None of our systems are really, homogeneous systems out there. And of course, if you really want to go down the metaphors, you can talk about chef recipes and try and mix it with music, and that just ends badly. But really, what it all comes down to at the very end is getting software onto systems in some way, and trying to get all the configurations together in some way that you can replicate all this stuff. So what is Ansible? Ansible is something that is based on Python. It's configuration management based in Python. I love Python. I hope you do too. If not, well, hope you learn and love it soon. It's also based off of several tools that are already available, stuff like Jinja, which is a templating language, their templating system under Python. It's based on OpenSSH, so that's how you get to your different systems. There's YAML for the configuration, so if you're already familiar with YAML, you'll be in great company with Ansible. So that all together comes to form Ansible. Why do we use it at our shop? We already are a Python shop. We're very comfortable with Python, so that's, tick one, Python. We didn't want to run yet another service. A lot of systems that are out there depend on having a daemon or something else that's constantly running, doing the configuration and change management for you. We didn't want to have something else hanging out there, taking up memory or doing whatever else, so that we talk to that, and then that does all this stuff. We're very comfortable with YAML. We do all of our configuration in pylons and pyramid using YAML already, so YAML's not a foreign concept to us. And we already have SSH. All of our systems support SSH, and so that's the way that we use with Ansible to get onto our target machines. And my boss is not here, so I can say this. We're already using Fabric, and I hated the way that he was doing Fabric. So if you understand Fabric, you'll understand why I had a little problem with that. One of the caveats of using Ansible, you have to have Python installed on your target machine. It will not run otherwise. Some of your most frustrating errors will be because if you try and run Ansible on a machine that doesn't have Python on it, it just throws up its hand and says, yeah, whatever. You'll also need, if you're using SSH and you're not using keys, you'll need to have SSH pass in order to use passwords on there. So you'll have to have that installed on your host machine in order to run that. This is a configuration file for Ansible. I'll go over that real briefly. Yes, you have to use no cows. If you have installed cowsay on your machine, Ansible will use cowsay in order to put all of the error messages out there and all of the other messages, which can be kind of a pain in the ass if you're, because then you have to just, basically a cow's saying, it's one of those lovely, cute things that developers like to do in order to differentiate themselves. I have ask pass equals true and then pseudo pass equals true, so that it will ask me whenever I do a deployment, it'll ask me for the password of the machine and for the sudo password of the machine, which are generally one and the same. I'm using SSH as my transport, and I'm using this for forwarding the agent. But sometimes agent forwarding in SSH can be real fun, especially if you are on a remote machine that's SSH to another remote machine. It can get really interesting. And then for whatever reason in Ansible 2.0, I have SCP if SSH enabled, because otherwise it gave me a weird error, and Stack Overflow said this would fix it. So some of the terminology with Ansible. Ansible uses the terminology of playbooks and plays as part of its deployment. So like in Chef, you have recipes. I know this is a real big one that's out there. So the idea is that you have a playbook that you run, which is a .yaml file. And each of the tasks that are in there are considered plays and whatnot. You can think of these playbooks as make files. And I tend to think of it as make files. Whenever you run make on a system, you know, make all, make install, whatever, what make will do is make will make sure that everything is all set for it to complete that action. One of the things about make files is that make files and playbooks should leave the target system in a consistent state when it's finished. So whenever it finishes running this thing, you will know that if everything is successful and it's not lying to you, that everything will be as you expect it to be. So start to finish, it will be in a state, an inconsistent state. Yes, fancy people call that idempotent, which is basically an operation to make sure that if you execute it multiple times, you'll get the same result out of it. So let's go over a simple play. And I'm going to say this is a simple play because most of this is just output because I'm using debugging on here. So what I'm running on here is I'm running Ansible with the -i for an inventory file. It will use a default inventory file, but I like to change it up a little bit so that I can run it on different systems as needed. I'm telling it which system it wants to run on to. I'm giving it a -m. -m is for the module that I'm going to be running. I'm going to tell it to use the ping module. And I'm telling it I'm running it on a Raspberry Pi, so I gave it a -u because the default user on the Raspberry Pi at the time was Pi. I changed it over to Ubuntu just because I'm a sadist. -vs, as many -vs as you need in order to get debug output. And then -k was for giving me the ability to put in the SSH password. So, this is says it is establishing a SSH connection, and then it goes through all these lovely little commands, and it'll show you each of the commands that it's running in turn. What's really important, though, out of all of this, is this little block here. This little block is number one in JSON, which means you can machine parse it, and number two gives you the status of how that ran. So the status of that, of running module ping, is Pong, which is basically, you know, anytime that my boss pings me, I respond Pong. So I can use this to, Anyways, there are tasks in each of these playbooks. What does a task look like? A task looks like the following. So you start off with hosts. I'm just running for all the hosts. Become is whether it needs to become sudo or not. And I think you can also give it which user it needs to be. You give it a name for that particular task. So in this particular task, I'm going to ensure that tmux is installed on this machine because I'm not an animal. And apt. So give it the apt command. Apt name equals tmux, and state equals present. So whenever this runs, it will say, is tmux installed in this particular machine? Yes or no. If it's not, make sure that it is. So it's pretty easy and standard and straightforward. Let's go see this in motion. I'm going to make this bigger in a second, so give me a sec. Don't do that. Of course. Lovely, lovely. There we go. All right. So I'm going to start with the first playbook in here. Now these are running on, I should explain what I'm doing here. These are running on 2 LXC containers that I have running and a Raspberry Pi. These are all on my home network. I was going to bring them in, but trying to run LXC and all that other wonderful stuff on this laptop would not be fun. So what this is doing, if I'm remembering what exactly it is doing. Okay, you see the little OK message down there? That's the Raspberry Pi that's saying everything is okay. Joys of live demos. All right, let me see what's going on. Sun's acting up. Oh, I know what's going on. The lovely thing about keys so I have to, because I have keys set up on my LXC containers, I have to add an agent, which gets into the whole forwarding keys and other sort of SSH wonderfulness. So if you are already having, yeah, you're right. That's giving me more than I. Oh, this works so fine in post. Oh, I know why. So if you already have trouble with SSH, this can be a real fun exercise. Are there any questions so far?
So you had Greg, you had a parameter VVVV. What was that all about?
That is for debug messages.
Verbosity. The more V's, the more verbose.
Okay.
It's probably able to be ignored.
That's actually true. Too open permissions.
Yeah, no.
So do you find yourself using this to stage a new box, or are you doing like full lists of boxes, or?
I'll get into more of my uses, but what I use it for is you can use it for just about any deployment that you're doing on your machine. So I'll get into that in a little bit later on. But yeah, we use it not only to stage new boxes and whatnot.
Oh, you use it for both. Are there minimal versions corresponding to Rise of Ansible? If you run into, like, you need something newer for.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second.
Oh, no
Something is
problem. I
happening.
know what you're having fun with. Passphrase dances with keychains.
All right, you know what? We're just going to play with the Raspberry Pi. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the inventory file because the other machines are acting up on me. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit the inventory file that I have, and I'm going to remove 2 of the production systems, quote unquote. So everything is going to be going to a Raspberry Pi on my network. So let me just go over that one more time because I'm playing a little fast and loose. So what I had in here is I had a production set of machines that are on here. So each of those machines are considered, you know, anytime that I reference production, that would be considered a production machine. What I have down here is Raspberry Pi. So this is just a Raspberry Pi that happens to be on my network at home. And so anything that references a Raspberry Pi or is in the Raspberry Pi group will then be included with this. So now what I will do is I will do my command again. It'll reference all of the hosts that are in that host file, and it will take all the Raspberry Pi group and the production group. The production group doesn't have anything in there, so it shouldn't actually do anything with any of the machines, and it should come back and everything should be all nice and copacetic, and I can get on with the presentation.
Mhm.
Let's try that again. So the dash VPVV is giving me all of this output. Normally it doesn't give me any of the output that's in blue here. All right, now it says, okay, I've got connection to all these machines, now what do I need to run? So it's going to run the command to actually get tmux installed on the Raspberry Pi. So you can see the task over here is ensure that tmux is already installed. Because it's a Raspberry Pi, and it's one of the early Raspberry Pis, it's going to sit there and go ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk until it finally gets everything all set up. Any questions so far? All right, and then the output comes back. You'll see the output comes back changed, and it'll tell me exactly what changed on here. And it gives a lot. It'll give me the output, so it'll be, reading database, as the Debian system does. Basically sits there and reads the database. And then it gives me a play recap, and it says, okay, for this particular machine, ran two things. Basically, I can connect to it, and I changed one of those things. So one of those things is that I installed tmux on that particular machine. So that sets a flag back that says that was changed. If I rerun this playbook, what will happen?
2 okay, 0 changed.
1 okay and 0 change.
I mean, it's a Pi, we've got time.
1 okay and 0 changed is my guess.
It should say 0 changes because that already made the change.
Those 2 tasks connect and make sure that
Oh, okay.
So basically, came back, said, I have nothing to do. All right? I can run this till the cows come home. I could give it to someone else on my network, and as long as they can run Ansible, and they can run this playbook, and it will do exactly what I expect it to do. Now, let's do the next playbook. And I'll bring up the slide here, just so I can say, and now to remove it. So, run the second playbook. Let me cap that real quick. So the state for removing it is absent.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. If you're not present, you're absent. Learned that in school. So it'll go through, do its little Debian thing, checking to make sure that everything is okay, that I'm not going to blow up the machine. And when it's all said and done, we'll come back and say, hey, guess what? tmux is no longer installed in this particular machine. There we go. Now, I didn't actually update the name on there. I probably should have put something like, ensure tmux is not in this machine, for whatever reason. All right. Demo. Now let's talk about roles. Now, one of the ways that I use in order to understand my machines, and the way that most people understand their machines, it's like, okay, this is the web server machines, this is the database machines, this is the HA proxy machine, whatever. We give them roles, basically. Or we give them a whole bunch of different roles as well. And what do roles look like? Roles, so I do just the type of the machine. So it can be, I've got a web server, whatever. Or I can also do the applications on this machine, because we get a lot of third-party applications and our own applications over at work. It's like, okay, this machine's not only going to be, for one of our examples, we've got a machine that used to be a mail server, like a mass mailer type mail server and whatnot, but it also was doing automated processes and stuff. We loaded up a lot of these machines in that. So there's a lot of different roles that that particular machine takes on. So rather than say, okay, that's a automated process machine or something like that, we can say, okay, this machine's got the following roles. It's got AP 45, AP whatever, I'll process such and such. So on here, we have a role that we use at work called dev common. And what dev common is that is a bunch of different things that we want to ensure are true on that particular machine. A lot of different packages that we want to ensure are true on that particular machine. So we'll install stuff like build essential and libssl dev on there, because some of the Python stuff that we have requires you to have SSL dev packages on there. We have a bunch of other different packages that we'll install in there, but because it's a Raspberry Pi, I don't want to try and install the entire world on there. Pro tip, if you want to do a demo of something, do not try and install Vim GNOME on a Raspberry Pi Minimal. That's hilarious.
Does it ever finish?
Sort of.
You need a cluster.
Yeah, that's why I need to cluster these things. So the only thing that I'm running in this playbook is dev common, the dev common role. So what does that look like? So dev common has a main.yaml. Main is basically a placeholder for anything that's in main gets run in that particular directory. And so that will say, if you have a machine that is a Debian machine, which a Raspberry Pi is, you need to do the following with all these particular items. And you'll see the Ginger kind of peeking through here. So basically it says, with each of these items, in item, do this. Make sure that those are present. And that looks a little something like this. Now I already installed these on this particular machine, so hopefully it'll grab it from cache and not have to do a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, apparently I already ran this and I never removed it. So it's saying, okay, all of those are already installed on there. So I got Build Essential and everything that comes with the Build Essential meta package and the SSL development as well. So, rock. Variables, we took a quick peek at what those variables look at. So you have the items for width, so each of those things gets plugged back into there. You can also do neat little things with Jinja substitution. So I'm going to use something, a group vars directory in here, which looks a little something like this. So I created a variable here called MOTD machine name, and it'll say Raspberry Pi here. If my production machines were working, what I would have in there is the MOTD name for production. Let me cat all here real quick. So this is a MOTD demo name is Ansible testing. And that will get replaced in there. But for each of these different machine types, which are over here, you should be looking a little familiar because those are the host groups that I gave it. So it will go through and find in the group variables this particular group, and we'll try and apply those variables to the in there. And let me show, just make sure that I'm going on here. Variables and templates. All right, so in templates, so I have my message of the day. Okay, so when you log into the machine, it's going to say, hello, demo name. This is a block, blah, blah, blah box. And it'll substitute that in there. And it doesn't happen automatically. You have to tell it to do that. So let me go over here to tasks. So I can add the MOTD to the system, and I tell it, okay, the source is in MOTD, which is in the templates directory, and I give it a destination of Etsy, so I want it to be in Etsy MOTD. I want the owner to be root, and of course you have to be root in order to do that, so I use a sudo. That looks a little thing. First I think
Can you sudo to another user?
you can, yes. I'm just using root in all of these cases. But
Okay.
yes, you can use a different user if you so choose. Okay. All right, so our playbook looks a little like this. We want to make sure that dev common is installed on this machine, and we want to make sure that the role demo machine is installed on there as well, because it's a quote-unquote demo machine. So that when I log into this Raspberry Pi, when it's all said and done, okay, it changed the MOTD. Hello, Ansible testing. This is a Raspberry Pi box. Got it installed on there. Now, if I wanted to change that up, you know, let's say I want to change up the template a little bit. You know, I remember all those lovely little things, you know, don't go onto this machine or otherwise bad things will happen to you. You're watching, blah, blah, crap, crap. What Ansible will do in that case is it will do a comparison. And it'll say, okay, it'll build the template initially, say, does this template match the MD5 sum of this other template? Yes or no? And if it doesn't, it will replace it. So it already figures out if there's any changes. It doesn't try and do a complex merging or any of that kind of stuff. It just says, if this is different, there you go, done. So let's log back in here. There you go, the FBI, blah, blah, blah. So changing templates. Now, I'm just scratching the surface on a lot of the stuff that you can do with Ansible. And you can do stuff like copying and removing files. There's modules for adding and removing users. You can put in even the password and whatnot. So if you want to add a particular user, let's say you have an auto process user or some other user that you want to have on all of your machines, you can drop that in there so it'll create those users for you. We use this a lot for cloning and pulling our Git repos. So what you'll do is you can tell it, okay, Git, you need to go over this particular thing, give it a tag or whatever that you want to deploy, and you can deploy those on all of your production machines. So pretty easy development. What we usually do at work is we do Git-based deployments. So, you know, we create a tag or something like that. But what would happen is, you know, you'd actually have to go onto the remote machine, make sure that all permissions were all set up, do your git co, reset all the permissions, blah, blah, crap, crap. This takes care of a lot of that crap for us and makes it so that the deployments aren't so difficult. Because, you know, basically, any of the stuff that you have to type in over and over and over again, script it up. And this makes it really easy to script it up and make sure that everything is A-okay when you're all set. We've also used it for extracting tar and zip files. It understands both of those. I think it also understands bzip as well, and gzip and all that other stuff. And for changing configuration files. You don't necessarily have to change your MOTD. You can change any of your configuration files, you know, Nginx configuration files or whatnot. That's really handy. So anything that you do in a shell script currently, you can do in Ansible. And it's pretty straightforward to get it to work. But this is a mug meeting. We're going to show off a little bit. Just a hair. So first off, I'm going to remove the MOTD file. You can do that. I'm going to make sure that tmux is also absent, and I'm going to purge its configuration files. How many of you develop on multiple machines? Many different machines. What is the most frustrating thing about developing on multiple machines?
Not having the
Consistent
same
environment.
tools.
Not having the same everything all over the place. Your same configuration files, that vimRC that you've been cultivating since 1992. Your bash file you've been cultivating probably just hair plus time than your vimRC file because it was .csh beforehand, or tcsh. Yeah. Well, what you can do, Ansible. Well, first off, let me show you one other thing that you can do here. So yeah, no, that is one use case, is that you can put your configuration files in there, and you can say, okay, you know, my vimRC needs to be here. You don't necessarily have to do this as root. You can do this as your own user on all of these different machines. Just add them into your host file and say, these are all the machines that I touch. Boom. Copy them out, and you're golden. If you have to do an update on one particular file, update it in Ansible, in the Ansible directory, blow it out to all those machines, and you're all set. So you don't necessarily have to use this for deployments. You can, you know, like the DevOps deployments or whatever, you can use this in the sense of, you know, I'm just a developer and I want to make sure that this is a consistent state that's across all the machines that I touch. Yes?
Was the username and password stored with each machine, or do they have to be consistent throughout?
You can store them on different machines. I'm actually doing a little hand waving here because the Raspberry Pi ships with a Pi user, and I actually went through and created an Ubuntu user on there. Generally speaking, whenever I've seen a deployment like this, well, first off, at my work, I'm always logging in as my account, and I'm always logging in. I have root permissions on those machines, so I'm kind of hand waving that too. There are ways to get around it. They're not clean. They're not particularly great, which is why I'm not demoing them right now, because I'm trying to do a very nice, simple, clean demonstration without too many hang-ups and hiccups and whatnot.
Brian, it does have the features you have to use for remote machines.
That too. But I mean, if you have something where it's like, you know, I don't control this particular machine and I have to log in as this particular user, it will do it. It's just kind of a pain to do it. It's not entirely, you know, it's not obvious. It is, no, I shouldn't say that. It is obvious how to do it. It's just getting it right is kind of a chore. Any other questions? All right. Now, on those lovely little development machines that you have out there, what is another task that you usually do? Or even, you know, let's say you have 2 Linode instances or something like that that you manage. You know, they're your own personal Linode instances. Maybe you have a few LXC containers or LXD containers hanging about. What's one thing that you do usually a lot? Yep.
I spin up a new one, I bring one down.
That's one thing to do, but let's say you want a long running instance or
Patches.
something like that. What's something that you do a lot? Oh, come on, apt-get update and apt-get upgrade or apt-get dist upgrade. Exactly. So, let's say you have multiple machines. You can do an upgrade, dist upgrade, to upgrade the cache. You can also give it a time, you know, let's say you don't want it to go out there on the machine, on the network and keep updating the cache every time you run this particular thing. You can say, you know, 3,600 seconds or something like that. So what does that look like? Hopefully it won't kill my Raspberry Pi in the process. How do you increase it?
So, if you have recipes, like, suppose, for example, you have Debian-based box and, you know, a Red Hat-based box. You
Yep.
want to do the same, you know, you may want to do yum upgrade instead of apt-get.
Yep, it'll support both, but what you'll have to do is you'll have to give it the yum-based packages, So like Build Essential is not a Yum package at all.
Oh,
So
right,
you have to
right.
find
But I
the
mean,
equivalent.
but the whole, what I'm getting at is, you know, the whole update, those are two different things for
Yep.
doing essentially the same thing. Do they fit in one play?
You can give it the same play, and you can do, and I
Are
kind
there
of
conditions?
glossed over this a bit, unfortunately. Let me get this finished, and I'll show you where I glossed over this.
We have conditionals and stuff, playbooks.
Yeah, that's one of the things, is a conditional playbook. So you can say, if I am on a Red Hat based system, then I use Yum
By
to do
using the
this.
CBSD package installs.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And are there minimal versions of Python and stuff that you run into, like, I need to use this Ansible and it requires me to update 3 things on the box? You ever run into something like that?
Not really. The only thing with Ansible is it does have a few packages, Python packages, that it needs to have access to.
Not just Python.
It's not just, you can't just do a plain vanilla Python and expect it to work. There's a few other things that it's going to require.
Okay.
As with most Python installs.
Right, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Most Debians install most of the right stuff, most users install the right stuff.
Most of the time.
Oh,
yeah. There's a few stragglers here.
Yeah,
and
my,
there.
my use case is not, my thinking here is not particularly Debian.
Yeah, I understand.
It's more-
No, we're a CentOS shop, as much as it chagrins me.
Yeah.
So, there
You
are
get more
certain things that I
money
have
in
to
CentOS.
flip flop back and forth on, because I like to develop on my Ubuntu machine.
Yeah.
That's what I'm comfortable with. Any other questions? Comments? And of course, doing this on a Raspberry Pi is, oh, there it goes. Okay, nothing really changed. I did this yesterday, because there's the OpenSSH bug or whatever, so I ran that, and it didn't upgrade on that. So, it'll go through, list all the machines, and say, hey, do the upgrade on this machine. So it's really cool stuff there. There's also handlers. Unfortunately, I don't. Yeah, all right. So there's handlers. So let's say you're doing an Nginx configuration update. What do you usually do when you are done doing an Nginx configuration update? You have to restart Nginx. Doing a reload generally doesn't end well. Unfortunately, you have to restart it. So what I have in this play is I do a notification. And under the handlers directory, handlers mean YAML, I have the name restart Nginx. And what that will do is that will do a service call for Nginx and do a state restarted. So it has to be in the state of restarted before it'll proceed. So it'll finish the rest of the playbook. It doesn't necessarily bounce out and say, I need to go do this. What it'll do is it'll say, this is a handler flag or something like that, and then it'll go through afterward. Usually afterwards, unfortunately they kind of changed it a little bit between 1.9 and the 2.x series. But at some point it will say, okay, I'm going to run the handlers, and then all the handlers run and whatnot. So it's really cool. Like for our stuff, we have Python virtual environments that we'll rebuild. If we don't use the system-based Python, we'll actually compile our own on the system. So we have it so where it'll set up and actually compile Python, and then I had it at one point, and I'm not sure if it still works, where it will go through and try and rebuild the virtual environments on that. It gets really hairy. And again, Ansible will give you as much rope as you want to hang yourself on some of this stuff. The Galaxy. Ansible has a market, if you will, not necessarily a for-paid market, although I'm not even sure if they'll do paid packages or whatnot. But anyways, this is a community area where you can share and distribute packages that you've built. And there are a ton of them. Basically, any open source project you can think of will probably have an Ansible way of setting it up, which is really handy so that you don't have to try and roll your own. So if you want to say, okay, this needs to be in MySQL box, you can probably grab something off of here and it'll probably make it mostly work. You may need to tweak it a little bit so that it doesn't do someone's crazy idea of what your MySQL instance should look like, but you can probably get something here.
You should be a little careful what distribution you're using.
Yes, unfortunately, like I said, there's a lot of people that have some very interesting ideas of how the world works. some of them are not going to be compatible with the way that your worldview works. And you can get into some really interesting things.
Is there a Galaxy updater?
How's that?
Okay, suppose somebody updates purelyguy.mysql.
Mhm.
What causes you have it? Is there some mechanism to sync?
Not that
Or
I'm
do you
aware of.
know that there's something?
Not that I'm aware, because you're copying this into your own playbook stuff.
Okay,
So I don't think it knows exactly where you got it from. It just says, hey,
okay,
your playbooks. and
good,
then
which
just
is
go-
cool. I'm just making sure.
It
Yeah.
does not change underneath your feet.
It's just like a text archive effectively.
Basically.
Of stuff.
Basically. So, like I said, there's a lot of rabbit hole to go down here with Ansible, and I encourage you to check it out. I'm available for questions. If you have any questions about it, I may have answers. Some of them good as well, but thank you. And there's also this wonderful book, Ansible for DevOps. I'm going to recommend it. There's also an O'Reilly book, which I found this to be a little bit better than the O'Reilly book, because number one, it's updated a lot more than the O'Reilly book, and I think there's probably a chance of it actually getting, I think it has 2.0, if not, it will have 2.0 at some point. So it's Ansible for DevOps. You can get it over at LeanPub. And
What's the difference between 1.x and 2.x?
they changed a lot of how, first off, how handlers work and how includes work. So in Ansible, you can include different files in different spots. And what changed from 1.9 to 2 is, I think in 1.9, it preloaded all of that stuff initially, so you could get into some import hell where, cyclic imports and whatnot. They tried to smooth that out, and I think they made it a little more confusing, quite honestly, in how it works, because it won't preload everything, so it'll load on demand, and it gets weird at that point. And then handlers changed up some as well. So, one other thing that I didn't mention, this is all Python 2. They haven't hit Python 3 quite yet, so if you are a Python 3 shop, you're going to have Python 2 in order to run this, unfortunately, until they get it all up to date. And I don't think they have any plans yet. I haven't followed what their plans are for getting up to date. Also, there is Ansible for Windows, if you want to check that out. I know we're all a lovely Windows crowd here, but if you happen to play around on Windows machines, you may want to check it out. I have not checked it out.
It works.
It works? How well does it work?
Pretty good.
Okay.
It works even better. after
Without
you
having to
do
install
that.
anything special on the machine too. It understands how to talk to the Windows services.
Yeah, that's cool.
The Windows, no, it talks to the same tools that PowerShell uses for remote management. So it just kind of slithers its way in on those ports, so you don't have to install anything there. It's
Yeah.
relatively slick.
I think that's where they've been putting a lot of their concentration is on the Windows side rather than the Python 3 side. To good effect. I mean, it's amazing what this tool can do.
Because you can actually do the game of, if you're building a lot of virtual machines,
Mhm.
you can spin up a virtual machine, tell Ansible to go connect to it, and go install all your trash on it. And sometime in the near, far future after it finishes, you now have a machine that is reasonably stable for what you actually want on it, without having to go through all of the pain.
Right.
So you're trying to do an environment that's totally repeatable,
Mm-hmm.
which is really hard on Windows.
Yeah.
Does the Windows one also use Python?
Yes, a little bit in the background, but it does a lot of PowerShell, so PowerShell needs to be installed. But everything is switching to PowerShell on Windows anyway.
Except Ubuntu.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
could you really say that?
I don't know. I don't know, honestly. Any other questions? All right, like I said, I'm available afterwards if you have any questions, and available at dinner.
All right, excellent.
Shall I give away a pie? Sure. Let's give away a pie.
All right.
All right, like I said, what is your name? Get it on here?
Bill?
Bill?
L-I-N-G-N-E-R.
Okay. All right. Machine guys are not being too happy. Okay. All right. Need to get the paper up.
They have to be here to win too.
You have to be here to win too, so.
Yeah, so I see some names that are here.
Scary guy.
Several times.
Oh, Evan, you're not here.
No problem.
Remus ain't here either.
He'll be spinning this a lot of times.
Yeah.
He should have edited the list beforehand.